It's just temporary, Mom, my 12-year-old son, Tommy, whispered, trying to find a comfortable position in the backseat of our Honda Civic. His sister, Emma, just 9, had finally fallen asleep beside him, her favorite stuffed penguin clutched tightly to her chest. I gripped the steering wheel harder, fighting back tears as I watched them in the rearview mirror. This was our third night sleeping in the car, parked in the far corner of a Walmart parking lot. My name is Olivia Parker, and at 35, I never imagined I'd be homeless while my husband, Marcus, rented out our children's bedrooms to his relatives. The same rooms I'd spent weekends painting and decorating, making each space perfect for my kids, were now occupied by his cousins who'd fallen on hard times. The rent money will help us get ahead, Marcus had announced last week, not even looking up from his phone as he collected $800 each from his cousins, Mike and Steve. Besides, family helps family. Apparently, that family didn't include his stepchildren. I met Marcus 4 years ago when I was still rebuilding my life after my first husband's death. He seemed like a blessing, charming, successful, and so good with my children. He promised to be the father figure they needed. Now I wondered if that had all been an act. The changes started slowly. First, it was comments about how my kids took up too much space, how their rooms were wasted when they spent weekends at their grandparents'. Then came the suggestions about maximizing our property value. I should have seen the signs. Last Monday, I came home from my shift at the hospital, where I worked as a nurse, to find Mike and Steve already moved in. My children's belongings were piled in garbage bags in the garage. "You're overreacting," Marcus had said when I confronted him. "The kids can sleep in the car until we figure something out. It's good income. Mike and Steve each paid 3 months in advance." I stared at him, not recognizing the man I'd married. "Their children, Marcus. They need their beds, their space." He just shrugged, pocketing the rent money. "Life isn't fair sometimes. They'll learn to adapt." What Marcus didn't know was that I'd been preparing for something like this. Call it intuition or just good planning. But 6 months ago, I'd started documenting everything. Every bank statement, every questionable transaction, every time he borrowed money from my account without asking. I kept it all in a locked folder on my work computer. The thing about being a nurse is that you learn to notice patterns, to trust your instincts when something feels wrong. And something had felt wrong for months. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Mike and Steve's friends might need rooms too. We could convert the garage. Good money in it." I didn't respond. Instead, I opened my email and clicked on a message from our bank that had arrived earlier that day. My hands trembled as I read through the statement, confirmation of what I'd suspected. The rent money Marcus had collected, $4,800 in total, had been deposited into his personal account. The same account he'd opened shortly after we married, the one he claimed was for business expenses. The same account that showed regular transfers to an online gambling site. Tommy shifted in the backseat, trying to find a comfortable position. "Mom," he whispered, "are we going to be okay?" I looked at my children in the rearview mirror, their faces illuminated by the parking lot lights. Emma still clutched her penguin, and Tommy tried so hard to be brave. They deserved so much better than this. "Yes, sweetheart," I said, my voice steady despite the anger and determination building inside me. "We're going to be more than okay." What Marcus didn't know was that tomorrow morning I had an appointment with the bank's fraud department. The documentation I'd been gathering wasn't just about his gambling, it was about our mortgage too. The house he so casually rented out, it had been paid for with my late husband's life insurance money. My name was the only one on the deed. Marcus thought he was so clever, turning our home into his personal income stream. He had no idea that while he was busy collecting rent, I was building a case that would bring his whole scheme crashing down. As I settled back in my seat, trying to find a position comfortable enough to sleep in, I thought about the bank records saved on my work computer. Tomorrow would change everything. Marcus was about to learn a harsh lesson about family and about underestimating a mother protecting her children. The sound of Emma's steady breathing and Tommy's occasional shifting filled the car. Despite everything, despite sleeping in a car while strangers occupied their rooms, my children were resilient. They were stronger than Marcus gave them credit for. They were stronger than he thought I was too. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Marcus. "Found 2 more potential renters. Could clear $2,000 a month easy." I smiled in the darkness, a cold, determined smile. Let him make his plans. Let him think he had all the power. By this time tomorrow, he'd realize just how badly he'd miscalculated. The bank records would show everything: the gambling, the misappropriated rent money, the attempts to profit from property he had no legal right to. But more than that, they would show who really owned our home. As I finally drifted off to sleep, I held on to that thought. Tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow we take back what was ours. And Marcus? He was about to learn that some forms of family betrayal come with consequences he couldn't talk his way out of. The bank's conference room felt too small, too warm. As I spread the documents across the polished table, Mr. Andrews, the fraud investigator, studied each page with careful attention, his expression growing grimmer by the minute. "Mrs. Parker," he said finally, looking up from the stack of papers, "this is more serious than we initially thought. Your husband hasn't just been collecting unauthorized rent. He's been running what appears to be an illegal subletting operation through multiple properties." My hands froze over the paperwork. Multiple properties. Mr. Andrews pulled up several documents on his tablet. According to these records, he's been collecting rent from at least 3 other houses in the area. Houses that, as far as we can tell, he has no legal right to. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. 3 other houses, while my children slept in a car. "There's more," Mr. Andrews continued, his voice gentle but firm. "The gambling transactions we've traced, they're not just random bets. He's been using the rental income to fund a systematic gambling operation, trying to cover his losses with new rental payments." I thought about the text messages Marcus had sent. His eagerness to find more renters. It wasn't just greed, he was desperate, trying to keep his scheme afloat. My phone buzzed. Another message from Marcus. "Found 3 more renters. Moving them in tonight. Don't come home. No space anyway. Can you show me the transactions from the past month?" I asked Mr. Andrews, my voice steady despite the rage building inside me. He pulled up the records, and there it was, nearly $15,000 in rental income, all funneled directly into online gambling sites. Money collected from people desperate for housing, including his own relatives, all gambled away while my children slept in a car. "We're prepared to take action immediately," Mr. Andrews said. "Given the evidence you've provided and our own investigation, we can freeze his accounts and—" The conference room door burst open. Marcus stood there, his face red with fury. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" he demanded. I stood up slowly, gathering my strength. "How did you find me?" He waved his phone. "Tracked your location. Thought you might try something stupid. These are private financial matters. Family matters." "Family matters," I repeated, my voice cold. "Like making your stepchildren homeless? Like gambling away rent money from properties you don't own?" His face paled slightly, but he recovered quickly. "You don't understand business. I'm building something here. Those kids were taking up valuable rental space. Those kids," I cut him off, "are sleeping in a car while you run a scam operation. Did your cousins know you were gambling away their rent money? Did any of your tenants know you had no right to those properties?" Mr. Andrews stood up. "Mr. Parker, I suggest you leave. We're in the middle of a formal fraud investigation." Marcus's smugness faltered. "Investigation? Olivia, what did you do?" "What you forced me to do," I replied, pulling out my phone. I played the recording I'd made last week, Marcus bragging to his friend about his rental scheme, about how he'd forged documents to lease properties he didn't own. "You recorded me?" His voice rose. "Your own husband? A husband who made his wife and children homeless? Who's been running an illegal rental scheme?" "Yes, I recorded you, just like I documented everything else." Mr. Andrews stepped forward. "Mr. Parker, based on the evidence we've gathered, your accounts will be frozen effective immediately. The police have been notified about the property fraud." Marcus lunged for the documents on the table, but bank security was faster. They appeared at the door, summoned by Mr. Andrews' silent alarm. "This isn't over," Marcus snarled as they escorted him out. "You have no idea what you're doing, Olivia. No idea at all." But I did know. I knew exactly what I was doing. After Marcus was gone, Mr. Andrews helped me complete the paperwork to secure my accounts and protect my assets. "We'll have your house cleared of unauthorized tenants by this evening," he'd assured me. "The police will handle the evictions." I thought about Mike and Steve, Marcus's cousins. His relatives, they paid 3 months in advance. They were victims too. Mr. Andrews nodded. We'll make sure they're refunded. As for the other properties, the authorities will be contacting the rightful owners. As I walked out of the bank, my phone buzzed with texts from Marcus's family, angry messages about betrayal and loyalty. I blocked each number methodically. In the car, Tommy and Emma were waiting with my mother, who'd picked them up from school. "Is it true?" Tommy asked. "Can we go home?" I started the car, feeling lighter than I had in weeks. "Yes, sweetheart, we're going home." But Marcus's last words echoed in my mind. This isn't over. Knowing him, he had one last scheme, one last attempt to regain control. What I didn't know then was just how desperate he would become, or what lengths he would go to when his carefully constructed scheme finally crumbled around him. Marcus's final move came 3 days after the bank meeting, just as we were settling back into our home. The police had cleared out all the unauthorized tenants, and my children were finally sleeping in their own beds again. I was in the kitchen making breakfast when my phone rang. It was the hospital's HR department. "Mrs. Parker, we've received some concerning emails about you accessing confidential patient records for personal gain. They appear to be from your husband." My hands gripped the counter. Of course, he was trying to destroy my career, my ability to provide for my children. "Those allegations are false," I said calmly, "and I can prove it." What Marcus didn't know was that every time I accessed hospital records, it was logged and monitored. His desperate attempt to discredit me would only prove his own malice. Later that afternoon, as I sat with the HR director showing her my authenticated access logs, my phone buzzed with urgent texts from neighbors. Marcus was at the house. I called the police immediately, but by the time they arrived, he had already broken in. He wasn't there to reconcile or apologize. He was there to destroy evidence. But Marcus had made one final critical mistake. When the police entered, they found him frantically searching through my home office, ripping through files and drawers. What he was looking for wasn't there. Every important document, every piece of evidence was safely stored in a digital format, backed up to secure servers. "You think you've won," he shouted as the officers handcuffed him. "I built this life. Everything you have is because of me." I stood in the doorway, watching the man I once trusted being led away. "No, Marcus. Everything I have is in spite of you." The charges piled up quickly: breaking and entering, attempted destruction of evidence, fraud, illegal subletting, and criminal harassment. His desperate attempts to silence me had only strengthened the case against him. 1 month later, I sat in another conference room, this time with the prosecutor handling Marcus's case. His gambling operation had been larger than anyone suspected, involving properties across 3 states. "He's agreed to a plea deal," the prosecutor explained. "In exchange for information about his other schemes, he'll serve 5 years. You'll be granted a full restraining order." I thought about the text I'd received from Marcus's cousin Mike earlier that week. "We had no idea what he was doing. I'm so sorry your kids went through that." The aftermath brought unexpected healing. Marcus's family, once they learned the full extent of his deception, reached out to apologize. Some had been victims themselves, losing thousands to his schemes. 6 months later, I stood in Tommy's room, watching him arrange his books on the shelves. Emma was in her room next door, singing as she played with her toys. The house felt like ours again, filled with the sounds of children instead of strangers. "Mom?" Tommy asked, pausing with a book in his hand. "Are you ever scared he'll come back?" I sat on his bed, patting the space next to me. When he joined me, I wrapped an arm around his shoulders. "No, sweetheart. He can't hurt us anymore. We're stronger than he ever knew." My phone buzzed, a message from a hospital. I'd been promoted to head nurse, my dedication and integrity during the investigation having impressed the administration. That evening, as I tucked Emma into bed, she hugged her penguin tight. "Mom, I like that it's just us now." "Me too, baby," I whispered, kissing her forehead. "Me too." The house was quiet now, peaceful. In the living room, I looked at the family photos I'd recently rehung, pictures of just me and my children, our true family. Marcus had tried to take everything from us. But in the end, he'd only made us stronger. The bank statement on my coffee table showed our new reality: my salary, my savings, my home. Everything in my name, everything earned honestly. No schemes, no deceptions, no desperate grabs for quick money. Marcus's last letter from prison lay unopened in my desk drawer. Whatever justifications or manipulations it contained, it didn't matter anymore. We had moved on, building a life without his shadow hanging over us. Sometimes the biggest betrayals lead to the strongest recoveries. My children and I were living proof of that.